All right, for today's explainer, we've got a real historical mystery for you. It's a story about a scientific golden age that just disappeared, and the brilliant chemist who basically became a detective to figure out what happened.
So, what do you think is the biggest threat to science? I mean, your mind probably goes to the usual suspects, right? Lack of funding, maybe misinformation. But what if the real killer of innovation is something else entirely? Something woven right into the fabric of a society?
Okay, so to really get into this story, there's a key idea we need to talk about first. It's the engine that drives all scientific progress, and it's called the scientific temper.
And here's the thing about scientific temper, it's not about a bunch of facts you memorize, it's a mindset. It's that itch, that need to ask questions, to test things out, and to always trust the evidence over what some authority figure tells you. It's a super fragile way of thinking, but man, it is absolutely essential for any kind of discovery.
Now, this idea really started to catch fire in 19th century Calcutta. You have to picture it. The city was just buzzing with new ideas. It was this incredible hotbed where thinkers were starting to challenge all the old ways and really get behind this new spirit of inquiry. And these guys were the pioneers, the ones who really championed this new way of thinking. You had Ram Mohan Roy, who used reason to fight social injustice. Then there was Ishvara Chandra Vidyasagar, who was convinced that a scientific education was the only way forward for the country. And get this, Aksaya Kumar Datta was so passionate about modern science that it actually led him to atheism. These guys, together, were lighting the fuse for a revolution. Okay, so into this supercharged atmosphere walks our main character. And he's not a philosopher or a social reformer. He's a hands-on, working scientist who just happens to stumble upon this massive historical puzzle. His name was Prafulla Chandarai. And we're talking about a world-class chemist here, internationally known. But his curiosity couldn't be contained in a lab. He got totally obsessed with the history of science in India. And that obsession led him to one single burning question. And this was the mystery that completely hooked him. See, from all his research, he knew that ancient and medieval India had this incredible, vibrant scientific tradition. So where did it go? How could a nation's scientific genius just, poof, vanish into thin air? This right here was one of his first big clues. Listen to that. That's not someone just blindly following old texts. That's the voice of an experimenter. It was stone-cold proof that this scientific temper we talked about was alive and well in India centuries ago, which of course made the mystery even more pressing. What on earth killed it? So Ray keeps digging, and his investigation doesn't point to one single event or some flawed theory. No, it led him to something much deeper, a fundamental crack in the foundation of society itself. He was about to come up with a diagnosis that would change everything. And here is the big reveal. The twist in the story. Ray's conclusion was that the problem wasn't intellectual. It wasn't a failure of the mind. It was social. It was a failure of the entire social structure. Okay, so this is Ray's head versus hand theory, and it is fascinating. He argued that the caste system basically drove a wedge between the head, the thinkers, and the hand, the doers. You had the intellectual class, the Brahmins, who were all about theory and philosophy, but they were forbidden from doing any manual labor. Meanwhile, you had the artisans and craftsmen, the people who actually knew how to do things, and they were stuck in the lower castes. So theory was completely cut off from practice. The thinkers lost touch with how things actually work, and the doers were denied any intellectual respect. A total disconnect. And this quote from Ray, man, it just sums up the tragic result perfectly. Once you snap that link between the brain and the hand, that whole spirit of inquiry just withers and dies. The engine of science just completely stalled out. And the fallout from this was just devastating. Think about this. Ray's analysis showed that because touching a corpse was seen as taboo, fields like anatomy and surgery, which had been pretty advanced, they just became lost sciences. The entire intellectual class just pulled back from anything hands-on. And in Ray's own powerful words, India's soil was made morally unfit for the birth of a Boyle or a Newton. But Ray's incredible idea, it didn't just stop with him. See, he was also a fantastic teacher, and he passed this torch, this crucial understanding of how society and science are linked, onto a whole new generation of brilliant minds. One of his star students was a guy named Meghnad Saha, and he took his teacher's arguments and ran with them, using them to fight the intellectual battles of his own time, always defending that essential unity of theory and practice. And just listen to this quote from Saha. It sounds so familiar, right? It's a perfect echo of his teacher's big idea. He saw it crystal clear. You snap that connection between the hand and the brain, and you get stagnation. Then there was another one of Ray's famous students, Satindra Nath Bose. You might actually recognize that name from Bose-Einstein statistics. So even though he was deep in the world of abstract math, he never ever lost sight of what science is really for, to get its hands dirty and solve real-world problems for real people. Bose had this powerful argument against these philosophies that tried to dismiss the real world as just some kind of illusion. He was like, no way. Explaining away poverty and ignorance is just ducking your responsibility. The only way to build a better society, he said, is through the knowledge of nature that modern science gives us. So, okay, this is a really fascinating piece of Indian history, right? But the reason we're diving into it today is because the lesson here is totally universal and maybe more relevant now than ever before. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it's that science isn't some inevitable force of nature. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's deeply tied to culture, and that culture can either help it flourish or completely strangle it. P.C. Ray's story is this incredible reminder that social barriers, like splitting knowing from doing, can be way more damaging than any technical problem. And it shows that defending that scientific temper is a fight that's never really over, anywhere. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. P.C. Ray found this invisible social wall that choked the scientific progress of an entire subcontinent for centuries. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the invisible walls today? What are our modern versions of separating the head from the hand that might be holding us back right now, without us even realizing it?